The moment I realized I had made the biggest mistake of my life by attending that high school reunion was when the room went quiet and my ex-wife laughed out loud. It wasn't a nervous laugh, but a sharp, deliberate one that sliced through the air as she looked me up and down. In front of everyone who once knew me as the guy with potential, she said it was sad but predictable that I had shown up alone, wearing a borrowed suit, still struggling, still invisible. For a split second, I felt 17 again, standing in a hallway with my head down while people decided who I would never become. I wished I had stayed home with my daughter instead of believing this night might prove something. As a circle formed around us, she casually explained how she had moved on, married well, and traveled the world, while I had chosen to be a single father, stuck in mediocrity. I could feel every quiet judgment settle into the room like dust. No one defended me. No one interrupted. I stood there smiling the way you do when leaving would hurt less than staying. Then, she leaned closer and delivered the final blow. Leaving me, she said, had been the smartest decision of her life, because she refused to raise a child with a man who never amounted to anything. That was when I felt something inside me give way. Not anger, not tears, just a deep exhaustion that comes from carrying shame for too long. As I excused myself and walked toward the exit, rehearsing how I would explain this night to my daughter without letting her see the damage, the doors at the far end of the ballroom opened. The silence fell so sudden it felt unreal. A man stepped in who did not belong to the past. We were all pretending still mattered. His presence bent the room without effort, flanked by quiet confidence rather than noise. As heads turned and whispers spread, I recognized him instantly as my boss. To them, he was the billionaire CEO whose name appeared on buildings and news articles. But to me, he was the man who noticed how I left early every day to pick up my daughter. The man who never asked questions but always adjusted meetings so I could make it home. He scanned the room, and when his eyes landed on me, he smiled. Not politely, not distantly, but with recognition. He walked straight toward me, past my ex-wife, past the people who once measured my worth by surface victories. When he reached me, he placed a hand on my shoulder and said my name with pride, asking loudly enough for everyone to hear if I was ready to head out, because the board dinner could wait, but my family could not. In that moment, the laughter, the whispers, the power dynamics all collapsed. My ex-wife went pale as realization dawned. The man she admired from magazines was standing beside the man she humiliated minutes earlier. As she tried to speak, he turned to her calmly and said that raising a child alone while building a life quietly was not failure. It was character. He said that some of the strongest people in the world never announce themselves. They simply endure. As the room stood frozen, I realized this night was never about proving success to people who only valued appearances. It was about understanding that dignity does not need applause. As we walked out together, my phone buzzed with a message from my daughter asking if I was coming home soon. I replied yes, because for the first time in years, I believed it fully. Humiliation only has power when you accept it. Sometimes the most meaningful redemption comes from quietly becoming someone your child can be proud of. Because long after the reunion ended and the stories were forgotten, the only thing that truly mattered was that I went home that night standing taller. Not because a billionaire had appeared, but because I finally understood that my worth had never been defined by who left me, but by who I stayed for. The ride home felt quieter than silence, not awkward or heavy, but thoughtful. Like the stillness after a storm when you realize something inside you has shifted forever. My boss didn't speak for a long time. Then, he said he had recognized the way people looked at me in that room before he even heard what happened. Because humiliation has a posture, and dignity has one too. He told me that the world often mistakes loud success for real strength, while overlooking the quiet discipline of people who carry responsibility without applause. His words stayed with me long after he dropped me off. I walked into my small apartment, where my daughter ran into my arms, wrapping herself around me with the kind of certainty that makes every struggle feel worthwhile. Holding her close, I realized the reunion hadn't reopened old wounds. It had exposed how far I had come, but the story didn't end there. The next morning, my boss called me into his office, closed the door, and said that he had once been a single father too, long before money, long before anyone believed in him. He explained that his life changed not because someone rescued him, but because someone finally saw him clearly. Then he placed a folder on the desk and said that he wanted me to lead a new division focused on community outreach and employee support for parents. Not as charity, but because he believed that leadership grows best in people who have carried real responsibility. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. A role built around my lived experience, flexible hours, meaningful work, and the chance to shape policy for families who felt invisible like I once did. I asked him why he trusted me with something so important. He answered that skill can be taught, but character cannot, and that the world has enough people who chase status, but far too few who understand sacrifice. As I walked out of that office with a future I never imagined, the memory of my ex-wife returned, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She didn't leave me because I failed. She left because she couldn't see value in a life built quietly. Later that week, when she reached out, asking if we could talk, I met her not with anger, but with calm honesty. She admitted that seeing me beside my boss had shaken her understanding of success. She had spent years chasing validation only to realize she never understood what she had lost. I listened, not to reopen history, but to close it with truth. Telling her the life I built was never meant to impress anyone, it was meant to protect someone. When I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in years. Months passed. The new role grew into something meaningful, helping parents negotiate schedules and building childcare partnerships. Every time I watched another single parent realize they were not alone, I felt the ripple of that humiliating reunion transforming into purpose. One evening, my daughter asked why. I smiled more lately. I told her that sometimes life humiliates you not to break you, but to place you exactly where you need to see who you really are. And she nodded, like she understood something far bigger than her years. In that moment, I realized the billionaire didn't save me that night. He simply reflected back the strength I had carried quietly all along. The true climax came quietly on an ordinary evening months later. The company hosted a family event, and my daughter stood beside me, holding my hand. When my boss stepped onto the stage, he didn't talk about profits or growth. He talked about resilience, about unseen sacrifices, about people who show up every day, carrying more than their job titles reveal. Then he paused, looked directly at me, and told the room that the greatest leaders he had ever known were not forged in boardrooms, but in kitchens, at midnight, helping children with homework, in moments where quitting would have been easier, but responsibility said otherwise. He invited me forward, not to embarrass me, but to acknowledge a truth too often ignored. Dignity is not loud, and success is not always visible. As I stood there with my daughter looking up at me, the years of quiet struggle, the humiliation, the doubt, it all dissolved into a single understanding. I had never been behind in life. I had simply been building something real. The applause didn't feel like victory. It felt like recognition of a journey already completed. Later, walking home, my daughter asked if this meant we had finally made it. I knelt down, looked her in the eyes, and told her that we had made it a long time ago the moment I chose to stay. To work, to love, even when it was hard and nobody clapped. She smiled and hugged me tightly. In that embrace, I understood the final truth. My ex-wife hadn't humiliated me that night. Life had simply revealed the difference between people who chase appearances and people who build foundations. As I watched my daughter grow calmer, safer, more confident with each passing day, I knew the real ending of this story would never be written in wealth or status, but in the kind of adult she would become. And that S, when it finally hit me. Sometimes the moment meant to break you is only there to show you how unbreakable you already are. The quiet man walking out of a reunion with his head held high is often the one who has already won the life that truly matters. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing. We'll see you in the next one.